Dear Diary, today will be different. It has to be.
I shouldn't have come home. I know the risk, but I have to know her.
I will no longer be the sad little girl who lost her parents. I will start fresh.
For the first time in a long time, I feel completely and undeniably wide awake.
For the first time in a long time, I feel good.
But how do I stop a monster without becoming one myself?
For once, I don't regret the day before it begins.
I welcome the day.
Because I know
I will see her again.
The genesis of this project was actually kind of kismet, I think, more than anything else.
Julie Plec and I were having lunch with Jennifer Breslow, who was the CW executive, and we were sitting around going, what are we gonna do?
I said, God, I love vampires. I would do a vampire show in a heartbeat if I thought that anybody would still do a vampire show after all these vampire shows.
As much as they were intrigued, they responded with skepticism. Do we want to look like we're riding somebody else's coattails?
I didn't necessarily want to do vampires, but I wanted to do something, you know, something sexy. And I think vampires are incredibly sexy.
Jen, who was an executive at the CW, said, well, we want to do a vampire show, and we have this property that doesn't have a writer that we've been wanting to put together. Do you guys want to do it?
I don't even know why I said yes. It just seemed like the right thing to do at the right time. Something about it made me want to be a part of it. And I wanted to work with Julie, and I wanted to work with the CW again.
The process for this show is really intense, and it was sort of fight to the end, really high stakes. People wanted this television show.
We're so lucky. The show is really great. We have Julie and Kevin Williamson, who are brilliant.
The minute I heard it was Vampire Diaries, Kevin Williamson, that's kind of all I really needed to hear.
We got the job because Kevin Williamson decided he wanted to do a show for the CW, really. I just was kind of along for the ride. I mean, he sort of was the pioneer of the teen television genre.
They had about 2 weeks to write the pilot script, which is unheard of.
Julie and I sat at a kitchen table for like 2 weeks, and we pounded it out.
It was the most speedy and, as a result, kind of harmonious process we could have had.
We just connected. We clicked when we were writing it, and it just sort of happened without us. Do you know what I mean? It was just sort of a really easy thing.
We wrote the script, we got picked up to pilot, we shot the pilot, we edited it, we hired writers, we started shooting, we had a series, and we've been going ever since.
I think Kevin and Julie, as creators of the show, have come up with a lot of different elements to appeal to a wide range of people.
The writers do such a beautiful job blending this crazy world of vampires and this just real world of what it is to be like in high school.
Add to that life and death stakes, and wow.
When you add a genre element into the world of a small town drama, of a teen drama, suddenly everything just seems more profound. It has more substance, it has more power.
What sets the Vampire Diaries apart is literally the human relationships in the show. It's more about the town of Mystic Falls and the history and everything that's happened in this town and how it affects the townspeople than it is about just the vampires.
You're dealing with romance and love.
And betrayal and hatred and envy and anything you can really think of that goes on with human emotions happens in this show. And there's vampires in it.
What the Vampire Diaries is about is love is eternal. And that's a universal and timeless theme.
We always said in the pilot, it's a girl who feels dead inside and a boy who is dead inside and how they bring each other back to life.
I met a girl. We talked. It was epic.
Kevin Williamson has had such a reputation for his witty banter, grown-up dialogue for teenagers.
Kevin has this like amazing ability to write dialogue that is so easily spoken by an actor. He actually makes it really easy for us.
To experience the different range of emotions as an actor is more than you could ever wish for.
They just flow and everything, you know, sort of like melds together beautifully.
Kevin Williamson has these iconic lines, these like one-liners, like with Caroline when she's like, I have an idea. Let's have a seance.
I don't think that's a good idea. Come on, now let's summon some spirits. This Emily chick has some serious explaining to do.
I try to stay away from sort of that scream voice of so everything's a reference or sort of this sort of self-referential, or even the Dawson's Creek voice where everything is psychobabble. You know, that was sort of unique to that. But I do want the characters in Mystic Falls to actually live in the real world.
Kevin definitely brings in a lot of pop culture references, and he also has this great ability to have the characters make fun of themselves.
I think it makes the audience be able to relate to it because they think that this could be a real school in Mystic Falls, Virginia, and these kids are very aware of what I'm aware of.
You want it to feel like it's in the real world because then you feel like it's real and it's really happening and these are real kids and they're really in this situation.
Our show and our characters live in the now. They're very much aware of the vampire phenomenon that's out there.
How come you don't sparkle?
Because I live in the real world where vampires burn in the sun. Ah, Miss Anne Rice, she was so on it.
I felt like we had to acknowledge it just to let our audience know our characters live in the real world. If you encountered a real life vampire, wouldn't the first thing you'd be is like, he kind of looks like Edward.
This book, by the way, has it all wrong.
We'd been told by the writers that the book series was going to be a beautiful skeleton for the show, but it wasn't necessarily going to define, what was going to happen, who was going to be with who was going to turn into what.
Our show is derived from this series of books, but we're obviously not going by the books at all. We're just taking certain characters and then making our own little world of the Vampire Diaries, with all due respect to what L.J. Smith created.
I could add my personal take to it, but at the same time honor what was there.
I think the most important aspects that have transferred from books to show would be the essence of the characters.
Some things just don't translate as well from the book to the series, and you have to make changes so that it works for the TV show.
It's always a balancing act. How far from the books can you get?
I think the very first decision that we made when we started breaking out how we were going to tell the story from book to TV show was to change Elena's little sister.
Jeremy, I know who you are. It's not this person.
Elena in the books has a 4-year-old sister, and which then turned into a 16-year-old troubled boy.
I was about to read the books until I found out my character was originally a 4-year-old girl named Margaret. So I figured that wouldn't affect my character all too much.
Some people were a little frustrated with that when they first saw the show, because Margaret played a very key role in the books, and that Margaret was the one who invited Damon into the house for the first time.
It's a pain in the butt to have a 4-year-old character on the show. And we also needed more men. There wasn't enough guys in the show that weren't vampires, so that's why we added the brother character of Jeremy.
Ah, God, what now?
One of the concerns that the network and studio had with regards to the book was that Elena was a little unlikable.
Elena in the books was kind of a bitchy mean girl, I guess is the best way to put it.
In the books, Elena's sort of that queen bee, popular girl, gets what she wants whenever she wants it.
That was one of our concerns. You can't have a pilot episode and dislike your lead lady. You can't, you have to like your heroine instantly.
If I had to characterize her like that from the beginning, I don't think anybody would have cared as much about the love story.
I want you to keep this. That way you'll know if you're ever in danger.
We're really kept in the dark, and I think it's because with the writers, things change constantly. I think they have their definite through line, but I think that with a show like this, new ideas pop up all the time.
You just trust that they've got it going, they know what's happening, and that it unfolds as it should, and that you can, as an actor, you can creatively surrender to that process and trust it.
We don't even know where it's gonna go.
We usually find out what's going on right before we start the next episode. Which is fun. It keeps us on our toes.
I cannot wait until we get the new scripts. I mean, I read one and I want to see what's going on next and what happens next, and I just get so excited. We all do.
They've literally had to put scripts on lockdown from us trying to sneak into them before they're perfected and ready for us.
If we get excited, I can imagine how everyone else is feeling and how hard it is to wait for the next episode, because I can barely wait for the next episode.
3, 2, 1, go.
Hey, there you are. Have you been down to the falls yet? 'Cause they're really cool at night.
You and me, it's not gonna happen. Sorry.
And cut. The very first thing that you have to do when you're putting a pilot together is hire your director.
We had one that we were circling, but I gotta tell you, I just wasn't sold.
We kind of kept saying, gosh, the person that we hire is so important. We just want someone who is as excited about it as we are.
Hey, Marcos. So 3, 2, 1, and then go, and I look.
You're looking this way. I'm gonna see the transformation, then you turn and go, ah.
Got it. Got it.
Don't be afraid to even just project that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah.
My involvement in the project just kind of all happened last minute. I read in the trades that Kevin Williamson was doing this project, Vampire Diaries.
Marcos is incredible, and we're so lucky to have him.
He sat down and said, "You gotta hire me, I wanna do this show. It's just so romantic." And it was like the first thing out of his mouth. And Julie, you could just see her swooning.
I mean, basically, it was that easy for me.
I sort of came from a place of the romance on the show and not the dark, creepy element of vampires. And I said, at its heart, the show needs to have some emotional weight to it.
And he kept talking and talking, and everything he talked about, it all led back to the love story.
Then I switched over and said, but it could be scary too.
Probably the best hire of Kevin's and mine's entire career, without a doubt.
He's our other partners. You know, everyone sort of like says Kevin and Julie, but it's Kevin, Julie, and Marcos.
He was the third partner of the show, without a doubt.
He really set such a beautiful tone for the show that made that first episode what it was, and I think started this incredible journey.
For me as a filmmaker, I get to create that world. I get to decide what the series is going to look like and feel like. And once Kevin and Julie were on board with my pitch, then I just got to do it. So that was fun. Really good. Now give me one with the mouth open.
You need to do anything else?
No, good. You'll open your mouth here.
Yeah.
And turn. And action. One more like that.
He has a relationship with the cast that is so great.
Marco Siega, who's supervising director, takes care of all of this over here.
He's like their brother, their buddy, their dad, their stern teacher.
As a director, I can see them in a way that they can't see themselves. I'm working with them, and I can notice their little tics and their habits.
If we have questions, we can usually go to Marcos, and he'll try to maneuver them for us.
I think that's gonna happen first.
Okay.
And then you'll come over. Yeah. I just need it to be a bit more frenetic. So let's rehearse it once.
He's everything that you could want somebody to be in a position of creative leadership, because he gets them and they listen to him, and he really is very personally and emotionally connected to them.
It may be actually that he says his line before you call for an ambulance, because you have to see that she needs an ambulance. Yeah. All right? I'm gonna bring in another extra here. Okay. And you're gonna say, give her space, and push somebody away. Okay. On this show, we talk about the flaws and we talk about the problems, and we've yet to have a situation where they haven't agreed willingly to confront and tackle a problem that I think is apparent.
You're only as strong as your weakest link, and I think that is how everyone approaches working on this show.
There's a lot of young kids, on board who are really focused and really care about doing the work, which is so nice to be involved in.
They want to be better, and they want to be the cast that people look at and go, they're really good. They don't want to be the soapy show that have pretty people who can't act.
People die around you. How could it not matter? It matters, and you know it.
You need to leave. Your wounds are bleeding, and you need to leave.
I would love when kids are flipping through the channels and they come past a show, they're like, oh, I know what that is. It has its own look.
Your one constant is sort of your DP. It's your director of photography.
Come around to here for Nina's POV of Paul. Okay.
I think our DP, Paul Summers, does such a cool job with setting up the shots and, really setting a mood.
That look, the glows, the nights, the shadows, all of those things that create our weekly look and stay consistent is our DP.
Paul Summers is one of our perfect hires. He is so cool and so smart and works harder than anybody I've ever seen. And his stuff looks incredible.
He's gold to the show.
Now that needs to go back where it was.
When I went into the initial meeting with Kevin Williamson, one of the first things out of his mouth was, make it darker. Now, as a cameraman, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. And usually when they say make it darker, I turn in footage and I get that wasn't what we meant by darker. What they meant was turn off all the lights except the ones on the actors. On this show, for the first 2 or 3 weeks of shooting, I went to what I consider dark. And I'm a pretty dark cameraman. And they kept saying darker, and they kept saying darker.
I can't tell you how many times I tell Paul Summers, darker, darker, turn that light off, go darker.
Marcos, when we're on set together, half the time, that's what comes out of his mouth all day long. It's darker, 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 darker. And I finally just stopped lighting the actors. I just lit the backgrounds. And I got the response back perfect. I don't know, it's probably broken me to do any other show because nobody else would let me do this. I'm having so much fun.
I knew that the pilot was going to shoot in Vancouver, but from there, we didn't really know where we were going to end up.
When we heard that the studio wanted us to relocate the series to Atlanta, a lot of us were skeptical about that.
Kevin Williamson was like, how do you feel about Atlanta? And I was like, I don't know, I've never been. Why?
Originally, it was due to the fact that Vancouver was getting so much rain. And then we get to Atlanta, where it rained like every week.
I remember in the summer it being 3 a.m. and the air conditioning not working very well and it being very hot on the stages.
Then what they didn't say was that hot Atlanta turns into cold Atlanta in the winter. And my wardrobe was only short shorts and tank tops, so I had to go out shopping.
Shooting in Georgia has absolutely helped create the aesthetic for the show and one that's more true to what it was intended to be.
I think they've been able to really set a great sort of landscape for the show.
Vancouver is tough to make look like Virginia.
There's locations in Georgia that we would never have found in Vancouver, that we'd never have found in a foreign country.
You can't really get that southern, post-Civil War-esque vibe in Vancouver.
Cheating the Pacific Northwest for the South would be difficult.
What Vancouver doesn't have is the history.
The storylines that we need to support visually work better here than I think they would have worked in Vancouver.
Just by the very fact that we're in Atlanta, we have the ability to do wider shots. We have the ability to really enjoy the environment and showcase the environment as opposed to having to hide the environment. Here, I feel like we can show whatever we want to.
I honestly believe not just, aesthetics, not just sort of the locations, but I just think it would be a different show. I don't think we'd be as focused.
The only thing we have in Atlanta is each other and the work.
Being here in Atlanta, kind of live in a bubble where it's just like strictly about the work.
I'm in Atlanta for one reason only, to shoot Vampire Diaries.
The crew puts so much work and so many hours into it, and we all really care.
I think it's been absolutely a positive thing. I think it's really put everybody in the right frame of mind.
Now I'm just really mellow, I'm living in the South, I'm chilling, it's fun. I've got my cast, we're like BFFs, I'm good.
And I think whether or not we were shooting in Atlanta or anywhere else, there's just such a great group of people that I really enjoy being around.
So many of our favorite moments are behind the scenes, and we're just getting along and hanging out.
I spend every waking moment with Ian and Paul, whether it be on set, whether it be on weekends when we travel for press. We're all together all the time, and not just Ian and Paul, the whole cast, we're all really, really close and we all hang out.
The bond of this crew and this cast is very deep and it's very tight.
And it's so hard being around people you love and adore, and it's so hard working with the most amazing crew that I've ever worked with. Oh my God, what else can I complain about?
I've never worked with a crew that's phenomenal, ever. Ever, ever.
We're really lucky, because I don't think this happens very often. Night shooting is difficult, but necessary for a vampire show.
Of course, on a show with vampires, you're gonna end up with a lot of night shoots.
It's actually not nearly as bad as people think because fortunately we have these day rings.
We went and got the best crew and we promised them all no night work, maybe a couple of nights here and there. Cut to day 3, it's like 4 p.m. call time, we're working all night.
Luckily, hot Atlanta, normally it's pretty warm.
We usually start off the week at 6 in the morning and up till 6 p.m. And then as the days go on, we push the call a couple of hours, and by the end of the week, we'll start at 5 p.m. and finish at 6 in the morning on Saturday. It takes a toll on you. It's really exhausting.
By episode 3, the crew is making day rings to wear and saying, what happened to the freaking day rings that we were supposed to have?
I can't even imagine if we didn't have them and we only shot at night. That would actually be, wow, that would be intense. I would literally become a vampire, I think.
Paul actually has fangs. I have this theory that he's actually a vampire because if he smiles, he literally has fangs, and that's probably why he got the part. They wanted to save a couple bucks on visual effects.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning. Time to get mean.
The teeth are made for each of us. They're sort of custom made. It's kind of hard to talk with them. I think that Catherine's teeth are bigger than Damon and Stefan's, and so it's hard for me to talk with them because I actually have a small mouth and a small jaw.
Here comes the fun part.
But the contacts are what hurt a lot, because they fill your entire eye. It's this big red contact. It feels like if a girl has an eyelash in an eye, you can feel it, and it just kind of hurts.
I cry like a 2-year-old when these things go in.
It's like you have 20 eyelashes in each eye.
Ha 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 ha. All right, let's go.
I think maybe a chair, and the closet was right here, and there's a dresser right
Did we
here.
have a nightstand or anything?
Gareth Stover, our production designer, is one of our other perfect hires. He works so hard, and he doesn't do anything halfway.
He can make an umbrella look good. I mean, he can just turn anything into anything.
It is amazing because we get the scripts. I mean, we don't have a lot of prep. And then literally in 2 days, I'm designing some big sets.
He built the entirety of the Mystic Grill on our stage. It is an enormous set. It is the size of a restaurant.
So trying to generate that sort of, you know, complexity fast, I think is what's really hard. And then the library is probably the biggest new set that we did. And the library is in the ground floor of the Salvatore House.
Kevin had said, I just want a big, epic home, maybe a plantation home, something that's been around since the 1800s that the Salvatores would have lived in.
Wow, this is your living room?
Living room, parlor, Sotheby's auction.
It's 2 levels, it's a very strange shape, so that when the camera's in there, you're never really seeing a square angle or a right angle.
That house is amazing. We didn't art direct anything. Everything in there is actually in that house.
It's authentic. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it looks like.
Kevin said very early on, God, I hate flashbacks. I hate flashbacks. Please tell me we don't have to do any flashbacks. And then would turn around and say, but you know what would work really well here is a flashback. It provides a window into the backstory of our love triangle. It provides a window into the mythology of the town and these founding families.
I love doing the flashback stuff for a lot of reasons. Getting dressed up and putting on the corsets and the big dresses and the hair and makeup is really fun.
Those are fun days to go to work because it really is, you're playing. You really do feel like a little kid again.
They laugh because they're like, oh, you know, I'm at craft service and a horse and carriage just drove by.
I love the flashback scenes. I think the flashback scenes are incredible. In fact, they may be my favorite scenes to shoot.
It must be Miss Pierce.
Please, call me Catherine.
No one is happier about flashback episodes than Nina, Paul, and Ian. Nina gets to be Catherine, which makes her so happy. She loves the costumes. She loves to be a naughty little bitch, you know? She loves to be able to take on another character.
Although, wearing a corset, I'm gonna tell you now, breathing is a luxury. It was painful.
Yeah, I mean, they cinched them in so tight, and she was telling me, I mean, it's just like layers on top of layers, and a lot of stuff goes into that, a lot of makeup.
The minute you get into that sort of like 1860s wardrobe, it changes you. It's unbelievable.
Well, this works out wonderfully for me.
How's that, Miss Catherine?
Now I'll have both of you here to keep me entertained. How will I ever choose?
I've never been able to be a part of something like this.
We could have never imagined that it would become what it is now.
This has been such a beautiful next step in my life as an actor and as a young woman and an individual.
I can't remember a first season of a series that's operating at such a consistently high level of performance.
Everything just sort of came together, and it's such a great show.
It works on all levels. It's really well written. The actors are doing a tremendous job. It looks fantastic.
I think the show has gotten progressively better.
There's nothing I don't look forward to coming to work, honestly.
Every day that I come to work here, I have at least 2 or 3 moments where I'm just like, this is so awesome. This is such a great job.
I have some of the best lines in television, and I'm so lucky, and I thank Kevin.
It's an incredibly prestigious thing to do a great show.
There's a lot more to our town, and there's a lot more to these characters that we'll see over the next season.
Anything could happen on the Vampire Diaries.
Hold your breath, it's gonna be crazy.
I don't know how many people have actually read the Vampire Diaries saga since 1991. I assume quite a few, but it is the most loyal and passionate group of people, as far as I can tell, that I've ever come across.
I'm definitely a fan of the show. I sort of went into the show knowing that I was gonna like it because I'm a fan of the the horror genre, and I'm a fan of the teen high school drama, but I didn't expect to like it as much as I do.
I hear a lot of people who question the sort of vampire craze and sort of reluctantly watch the show, not knowing what it was about, not sure, you know, and are pulled into it because it works on all levels.
When the show premiered and we had the highest premiere in CW's network history, I think that was the first indicator of, oh, okay, wow.
It beat out franchise shows like 90210 that had like years of hype behind them. It beat out shows like Gossip Girl that, you know, had this huge following before the show even launched. And so it was kind of a surprise hit.
Nina lived with me for a while in Los Angeles, so before we knew that the show was getting picked up and we didn't really have any answers, there was this one website, vampirediaries.net, that we would check constantly and consistently because they'd always have new information.
When the show was announced, myself and Red, who was also a huge fan of the Vampire Diaries book series, decided that we should start a site and let people know that this book fandom exists and that we're excited to watch the development of this TV show and follow it, see what happens, whether the show happens or not, but at least get the name of the series out there and kind of put the highlight on the books.
One of the reasons the show's successful is because of her and Red and V, both of them together. I mean, they actually helped make the show.
It has kind of become the go-to site for all the fans, both of the books and then people who tuned into the show and have become fans of the show, where they get to kind of debate it out and hash it out amongst themselves. And their point of view has been really productive.
We're not just seeing the books and can expect every single step of the way what's going to happen. This is an entirely new story that's being told, and they want to know the answers, and they want to know where it's going. People expected critics to hate the Vampire Diaries. People expected it to be another Twilight where they've got fans, but the critics are tearing it to shreds every day. But that hasn't been the case with Vampire Diaries. Critics have really taken it for what it is and given it a lot of props.
There's something special about the Vampire Diaries. To my mind, it has done the best job of putting the vampire in high school. It's got a great ensemble cast. It's very well scripted, and it isn't afraid to be scary.
Anyone, anytime, anyplace.
Vampires draw their energy from blood, which is probably the most powerful human symbol of them all, because it can stand for just about anything. It stands for the emotions, the passions, the life force itself, sexuality, and the sight of blood, of course, represents death. All through its history, the vampire has been one thing, an outsider. And the outsider, of course, can be a repellent monster. It can also be a romantic anti-hero.
You can sort of take him and put him in different situations and different circumstances, and they're always sexy. It's just, there's so many possibilities for great vampire stories.
I love it. Everything vampire, from fashion to TV to film.
Even before Bram Stoker, there was a whole vampire culture. He made up different rules when he wrote Dracula in 1897, and a lot of people use that as a kind of prototype, but yet so much has changed.
We think of Dracula, especially if we haven't read the book, as a archetypal, sophisticated, suave, seductive aristocrat. Bram Stoker wouldn't recognize that figure at all. His Dracula was a hideous old man who became younger as he drank blood, but he never became attractive, and he certainly never seduced anybody.
I mean, his vampire had a pointed head, pointed ears, hair on his palms, fangs protruding over his lower lips.
In European folklore, the vampire was pretty much indistinguishable from what we would think of today in movie terms as a zombie. You know, a ravenous living corpse who rose from its grave to take energy from the living. The big turning point in the evolution of dramatic vampires was when Dracula was adapted to the stage. And this is where we got the evening clothes and the opera cape and the suave Transylvanian charm and all the things that every school kid today will tell you Dracula requires. Stoker would be flabbergasted.
They're modernized now. They're young and they're hip and they're sexier and they're better looking and they're not so foreboding.
I think the seeds of sexuality were always there in the vampire, but it was a long time before they became out-and-out romantic figures in literature and popular culture.
They are incredibly versatile creatures. If you go back to the classic monsters of the Universal cycle back in the 1930s, and you think of the Frankenstein monster, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, the Wolf Man, the Phantom of the Opera, out of all those monsters, the vampires have made the greatest transformation. These creatures have been able to cross every single genre. Vampires have appeared in sci-fi, action, they've been superheroes, anime, westerns. There was a vampire ballet by the Royal Winnipeg Ballet Company called Dracula, Pages from a Virgin's Diary. You can't imagine zombies doing that.
Looking back at all the B horror stuff, you know, and those creatures all sort of got left in the in the dust, and the vampires evolved into this, you know, total sex symbol.
It's the vampires that usually do work. Werewolves, it's tough. It's tough to make werewolves work. It's tough to make any other creature work and to live in a human world. There is a nice sort of foundation of what vampire lore is supposed to be.
You hate him and you love him, and I always say the greatest villains are people you can sympathize with.
Get it in the car, quickly.
And you can almost see why they are the way they are, even though they do terrible, terrible things.
I'm at the Sizzler. I had the buffet.
They're able to have everything they want, yet have nothing at the same time because they feel nothing for what they have.
They are able to do things that people dream and think and imagine, but aren't actually possible.
Whoa, how did you do that?
What vampires represent are power and sex and mystique.
They appeal to this mystery that every young girl wants to, and a lot of young men kind of, when you're a teenager, you like going to that forbidden place.
They're incredibly knowledgeable. They can be very violent and dark and bad boy.
Ow!
They're alluring and sexy and mysterious and unattainable.
Taking that costume a little too far?
I think there are two characteristics, essential characteristics that you really can't take away from vampires. And one is their immortality.
It's cool not growing old. I like being the eternal stud.
Yes, being a 150-year-old teenager has been the height of my happiness.
You take that away, you don't have the undead. You have something totally different. The other thing is they survive on blood.
I prefer mine at 98.6.
In most vampire stories, there's always a girl.
Girls are looking for a kind of boyfriend hero who will adopt some of those mannerisms and culture that maybe our society has lost. So when you have someone like Stefan, he protects Elena, he's very much of a gentleman, and I think there might be a yearning in our society for the teenage and 20-something population to kind of bring a little bit of that back. They would like to see that in our relationships.
Don't hide from me.
You have the immortal pursuing the mortal, and there's something that's so unattainable, and I think that's what's really alluring about vampires, especially, you know, for women.
You know, from the audience perspective, you kind of sympathize with that longing and that wanting of someone you can't have.
In fact, Stefan and I have watched almost every single person we've ever cared about die.
We don't need to get into that right now, Damon.
Poor Elena, I mean, not only, you know, navigating through your teenage years and especially after her parents have just passed away, but then to meet someone who could just be the love of her life, and then to find out that he's not actually living, I mean, that could be a bit of a shock.
Part of me wishes that I could forget too. Forget meeting you, finding out what you are and everything that's happened since.
The story of love between the mysterious loner, bad boy, outsider with the piercing gaze and the woman, you know, the girl that's just looking for the right piece of her life that's missing, and bringing those two together and then adding the vampire element on top of that. It's just like, it's perfect storytelling. You can't really...
One thing that they do differently that we haven't seen, at least in a very long time, is the female characters in the Vampire Diaries aren't victims. They're not passive. Their lives aren't just happening to them, and they're not submissive. They're powerful and active, and they're participants in their own fate. They're making decisions for themselves. They're asking questions. My experience with the fan base of the show has been incredible. I post an article, and within minutes, I have comments, I have tweets, I get emails all the time from fans talking about, really passionately about the show and really getting into it and talking about the characters and their motivations. The fans of the show talk like writers.
And they have these conversations with each other, and they want to know, and it's kind of a vibrant, living, breathing thing, which it hasn't really been. Because now you have social networking, now you have the internet and this massive platform for fans to express their excitement and to their love of the show and the books and to interact with each other. There's a lot more easier avenues for communication.
I think people will say to you that one of the worst things that you can do when you're writing television is to read the internet, and yet you just can't help yourself.
I signed up for Twitter, and so you sort of hear it firsthand, and you hear everything that's wrong and everything that's right, and that's the beauty of having sort of that one-on-one with your, you know, your very sort of loyal fans, or the ones that are most outspoken.
It's pretty crazy how it all works and how much access the fans have to people on TV shows because of Twitter and Facebook and all these things.
I have a Twitter, and that's a big tool to reach fans, because you can see when they want to reply to you, and if you want to send something out to them, I mean, it goes out to all your followers instantly.
I talk to them on Twitter. I've gotten a few more followers, so it's hard for me to see when they like message me on that.
I personally have hard enough time checking my voicemails. But I send my love through Nina and Katerina's Twitter page.
You know, you're taking photos with your co-stars and watching this go on Twitter, and then 2 days later you'll see it in a publication or something. I mean, the expedient manner in which information travels now, how quickly it is really fascinating to me. It's really cool.
I enjoy that part because you feel connected to the fans. You feel like you're a part of that community. And that's probably something that other filmmakers and creators of shows didn't experience before.
There's almost nobody who's a casual viewer of this show. They're not just watching the show, they're watching the show, then getting online, they're talking to their friends, they're going to Hot Topic mall signings in the thousands, like screaming and, you know, looks like a fire hazard.
2,500 people screaming every time Ian would go to open his mouth, but he wouldn't be able to finish a sentence because they were screaming so loud he couldn't hear his words.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you guys.
The screams, shrieks. I couldn't believe it.
They were screaming and crying, and I mean, my heart just like exploded. It was the most amazing thing ever.
To actually like meet fans, the meet and greet, that was just so amazing.
In real life, who would you pick, Damon or Stefan?
She actually has a great answer to
You know,
this. So.
if I had to pick
Yeah.
between Damon and Stefan, I would honestly go for their other brother, Defin. Defin, the other brother.
Season 3.
You're so unaware, you know, you're going to work every day, you're oblivious, and then you're like, wow, people really do watch this thing.
There was one girl who her mom was carrying her, and she was hiding behind her hair because when she saw Ian and Paul, she thought they were actual vampires, and she was terrified of them. Which in contrast to the other girls who were between 12 and 30 who asked Ian and Paul to bite them and kiss them. And it was just, I don't know what it is, but they love their vampires. They really want a real life Salvatore.
Nina, Paul, and Ian went to Comic-Con, but it was before the show was released. It was just to premiere the pilot. So hearing their stories from that, in which everything was still beginning, and then cut to our Hot Topic appearance when we're in this mall in Georgia with 2,500 screaming girls that are about to cry at anything that Ian Somerhalder says. It definitely, it was a very surreal moment for all of us.
We got here at 7:45 this morning. We've been waiting for 7 hours. Yeah, I just thought they were all amazing. I drove 5 hours to get this poster. We're still in shock, obviously.
I think Julie Plec was honestly astonished that they won the People's Choice Award for favorite new TV drama because they don't have nearly as many viewers as all of the other shows that were nominated in that category.
The People's Choice Awards are different from any other award show because they're not decided upon by experts or judges or an academy. They're voted on by the general public online. They won the Best New TV Drama for 2010. The fact that the Vampire Diaries won that shows not only the size of the fan base, but the passion of the fan base, because people were going on and voting as many times as they could. They were starting sort of grassroots campaigns on Twitter and fan sites and Facebook.
I don't think anybody, when we started this out, were expecting a People's Choice Award. I think we were hoping for a back nine before anything, and now it's just kind of exploded into something that I don't think any of us really anticipated.
For me, that was like, oh, wow, because the people voted. They voted the Vampire Diaries, so that was really cool. We're very grateful.
The fans feel like they know them on some level as far as these personalities that have always been really positive and supportive and playful with them in this online forum, that there's a lot of affection for the personalities behind the show as much as there is for the show itself.
Vampires are and hopefully will be for a long time the craze and the phenomenon, and as popular as they are now. It's kind of cool to be part of the craze and be part of the phenomenon that is vampires.
Such a fulfillment to my 12-year-old self to be a part of one of these television shows. So I will be the first one to admit that I geek out about it.
20 years from now, when I'm still acting, I'm always gonna have a point of pride to look back and say that I was part of, like, the emergence of the vampire genre in the 2000s. I'll always be proud to say that. You know, it's huge, I think. It's a revolution in its own, but, like, it'll probably die out again, and then in maybe 20, 25 years, it'll pick back up again, or 10 years or less than that. And I can always just say, yeah, I was on one of those vampire shows.